My fiancée wants to end things. She stated her friends think she deserves better than a welder and that I'm out of her league. She wanted to get back together when her backup plan didn't work. Hey everyone, I need your help before we start today's video. We've seen that the channel isn't getting as much attention as it used to, and subscribing is one of the finest ways you can help us. It's free, quick, and it helps us keep making great stuff for you. Your help means everything. Let's work together to make this channel bigger. Thank you very much. Let's begin the video now. Hey, Reddit. My fiancée dropped this bomb out of nowhere. We had been planning our future together for years, and I thought we were building something real, so I honored her choice and left her life. A few months later, I had a risky surgery, and she came to see me and asked for my aid and wanted to be back together. This is what happened. I'm a 25-year-old man who has been with my ex-fiancée, Kayla, for 6 years. We've been engaged for the last 8 months. I am a certified welder in a fabrication shop in the area. I make good money, have steady employment, and I really do develop things that matter. Kayla works at a fancy salon in the city center where haircuts cost $200. Kayla is pretty, very good-looking, the type of woman who gets double looks at the grocery store and complimentary drinks at places she doesn't even want. I'm just an ordinary person that understands how to use a MIG torch and can fix most things that break. Not ugly, but not good enough to be a model. We work together because we were a good fit in important aspects. We met in our last year of high school when she was dating Brad Mitchell, the quarterback who peaked in high school and thought his jersey number made him special. When her old automobile broke down in the school parking lot, I was the guy in shop class who really knew how to fix it. Brad was too worried about his hair getting messed up to get dirty. It took me about 20 minutes to figure out that the alternator was broken, and then I had to spend another hour that weekend replacing it for the cost of the parts. That's how it all began. She would text me when something went wrong. I would fix it. While I worked, we would talk. She would giggle at what I said. And just like that, we clicked. We got engaged last July while we were camping, something we had been planning for months. It was just us, a bonfire, and the ring I'd been saving for since February. A white gold setting with a 2-carat diamond. Took me 12 weeks of extra work, but seeing her expression made it all worth it. We picked a date for the next year in October. We gave us enough time to save money and make plans. After Kayla said yes, I called my best friend Leo right away. When I told him, he remarked, "Dude is your best mechanic and has no problem giving relationship advice. I was beginning to worry you were going to ask your welding torch to marry you instead." For months, everything felt stable. We chose a place to have the wedding, hired a photographer, and started talking about where to go on our honeymoon. Kayla would send me photographs of clothes she liked. I'd act like I had strong feelings about flowers and centerpieces. Everything was fine. Kayla started going to a new exercise class downtown in January, and that's when the first crack developed. A hip Pilates studio that costs more per month than most people spend on food. After the holidays, she wanted to get more into fitness, and I was all for it. It wasn't the fitness class that was the problem. The issue was the women she met there. Kayla would tell her parents about her new buddies at the gym. Jessica, who is married to a corporate lawyer, drives a BMW and recently got back from Cabo. Sarah is dating a cardiologist and looking for engagement rings that cost $50,000. Amanda is just divorced and gets $8,000 a month in spousal support. She is looking into her choices. At first, these were just random tales. Kayla would talk about how Jessica bought a purse for $400 without thinking about it, or how Sarah's boyfriend surprised her with a weekend in Napa. I listened, said what I thought was right, and didn't think much of it. Why would I? You made a mistake. But the story started to change around the end of February. Kayla didn't simply talk about what these women accomplished. She also included her own thoughts. Jessica thought it was adorable that Kayla was getting married so young. Sarah didn't get why Kayla would want to settle down when she had so many other alternatives. How Amanda kept telling Kayla that she was squandering her best years on one guy. When Kayla initially told me one of these things again, I kept it simple. These ladies don't know us. What matters is what we want. She said yes. Stated they were just being nosy and promised not to let what they thought get to her. But the remarks continued coming, and they got more and more explicit. things got strange in March. She began to pick on things that had never upset her before. When I picked her up from the salon, my work clothes were pretty soiled. Can I change before we go out to eat? The noise from my pickup was annoying. Should I have thought about obtaining something newer? Since we were getting married shortly, I might want to think about broadening my job ambitions. There weren't any fights. Kayla wasn't being rude or harsh, but every comment felt like a little test to see how I'd respond to ideas about how to do better. I kept my answers calm. I told them that my work clothes become dirty because I do real labor. I told them that my truck was paid off and worked well. I said that one of my professional ambitions was to become a qualified underwater welder, which would quadruple my pay in 2 years. She would always give in when I pushed back, but I could tell that she was thinking about my answers in a different manner than she used to. It seemed like she was comparing things to some outside norm that I didn't know about. In early April, things reached a breaking point. We were going to have dinner with her parents at their house. There is no formal Sunday family supper. I worked all weekend to perform structural repairs on a warehouse before the Monday deadline. I was late to Kayla's place by 20 minutes because my work took longer than expected. I was still in my work clothes and had a little bit of metal dust on my hands. When Kayla saw me, her whole face changed. "Are you really going to my parents' house like that?" I looked at myself. A little dust on the pants, a work shirt with the company emblem, and steel-toed boots are all fine. I'm coming right from work. Your parents have seen me in my work attire previously. That was not the same. This is the meal. Can't you at least switch? I'm already 20 minutes late, Kayla. Your folks won't care what I'm wearing. She stood there for 30 seconds, staring at me like I had spoken a language she didn't know. After that, she picked up her bag and went to the door. Okay, but this is embarrassing. That word had a different effect than the other comments. Not upset or let down. Shameful. She acted like she had to apologize for being seen with me. The dinner was quite uncomfortable. Kayla hardly said anything. She seemed like she was distracted while checking her phone. Kayla's parents tried to get me to talk about the wedding, but she kept giving brief responses and changing the subject. She rolled her eyes when her dad inquired about my underwater welding qualification. I tried to talk about what had transpired on the way back to her apartment. Do you want to tell me what that was all about? Nothing. I'm just worn out. Kayla, you acted like you didn't want to be there with me. I wasn't embarrassed. I simply wish you had tried harder. What do you want to do more of? Be someone else? That query didn't get an answer from her. We just looked out the window till we came to her apartment. The next day, I called Leo to talk him how upset I was about everything. What comes next? Are you going to be mad because your hands are too rough from making things that don't fall apart? It seemed like watching a vehicle wreck in slow motion in April and May. Kayla didn't change into someone else all of a sudden. The shifts happened slowly, almost without me noticing, but they were persistent enough that I could sense something moving beneath us. Almost overnight, the people in her fitness class became her main social group. She'd have dinner with them twice a week, breakfast on the weekends, and shopping expeditions to fancy boutiques I'd never heard of. She always had an excuse when I requested to meet the people who were taking up so much of her time. They were busy. It wasn't the proper time. Next time, maybe. At the same time, she began to turn down offers to hang out with our pals. She didn't really like game nights with my friends anymore. Double dates with couples we'd known for years suddenly felt too young for her. She stopped going to my family's and company's barbecues and other events, saying she was too busy with work or had arrangements with her fitness pals. During a group hangout in late April, Leo was the first to say it straight out. "Where is Kayla tonight?" Mike, our friend, inquired. I told her I was going to taste wine with my fitness mates. Again, Leo looked up from his shot. "What is this? The fourth weekend in a row? Either they women drink too much or Kayla is learning how to be a sommelier." The criticism got sharper and more frequent. My apartment was quite simple. Had I considered about getting a better one? The clothing I wore on the weekend were pretty casual. I might want to get some finer clothing. Dinner at a nearby restaurant and then a movie was a very normal date night for me, but other couples were doing more exciting things. Every time someone criticized anything, they also gave a recommendation for how to make it better. They always framed it as helpful advice instead of complaints. Kayla wasn't being mean about it, which made it worse in some way. She was treating me like a project that needed to be worked on. I began to notice the exact words she used. We talked about words like ambitious, sophisticated, and professional all the time. Always different from aspects about our lives together. Other men had big plans. I was happy where I was. Her new companions were smart and classy. The people we used to hang out with were a bit childish. The boyfriends of her coworkers had jobs. I only had a job. I told Leo about some of Kayla's recent comments on one of our regular beer nights in May. Leo said, "Wait, hold on," almost choking on his drink. "You have just a job," she remarked. "What does Jessica do again?" She spent her husband's money on yoga pants, and their sex life got worse. Kayla lost interest and seemed more distant, as if her mind was elsewhere, even when we were together. She began to work longer hours at the salon and take on more clients on the weekends. She would remind me how vital it was for her to focus on her business and expand her network when I proposed we spend more time together. Things became worse in May. She began to compare me directly to other males. Jessica's husband had just been promoted at his law firm. Sarah's boyfriend was looking at homes in the pricey section of town. Amanda was seeing a guy who had his own business and drove a Tesla. Kayla would say, "I'm not saying you should be like them," after telling these stories. It's funny how some people really go after what they desire. I tried to deal with this directly a number of times. I asked her if she was dissatisfied with our relationship, if there was something specific she required from me, and whether we should put off the wedding until we figured out what was going on. Every time I'd claim there was an issue, she'd say she loved me just the way I was and then give me another idea for how to make myself better. The qualification for underwater welding came up all the time. When did I start the program? How much more money would I make? Would I think about migrating to a place with more chances? She had looked into how much underwater welders make and was sure this was the way for me to realize my full potential. The breaking point came at the end of May when we talked about how much money we could spend on our wedding. We had been preparing a lovely but not too expensive party, with a total cost of roughly $20,000, which would come from both of our families and our savings. Not fancy but not cheap either. Kayla talked about how Jessica's wedding cost $80,000 and looked like it came from a magazine. How Sarah was already arranging a $60,000 celebration to be engaged. How Amanda's divorce settlement gave her enough money to buy anything she wanted for her upcoming wedding. Kayla remarked, "I'm not saying we need to spend that much, but don't you think we should think about what we could do if we truly tried?" "What do you mean?" "I mean, if you really wanted to broaden your career possibilities and I took on more high-end clients, maybe we could have the kind of wedding that really shows who we are." "Kayla, who do we want to be?" She couldn't give a direct answer to the inquiry. She didn't show me pictures of Jessica's wedding on her phone instead. Everything, from the setting to the flowers to the outfit to the photographer, looked costly. "Don't you think this is pretty? It's nice, but it's not us." "How do you know what is us?" We might have been thinking too small. Kayla's fitness classmates weren't the only ones giving her advice. She was changing the way she saw the world. These women had made her believe that getting married young would mean missing out on chances. That marrying someone who worked in a blue-collar profession meant giving up on a bright future. In June, I quit attempting to save something that was already dead. The last month of our relationship felt like living with someone who looked like my fiancée but wasn't her. Kayla would come home from her workout class or dinner with her new friends and start scrolling through social media right away. She would show me pictures of places she wanted to visit, restaurants she wanted to try, and experiences she wanted to have. All of them were expensive and needed a lifestyle we didn't have. "Check out this Napa spot that Sarah went to. Isn't that amazing? It looks good. Kayla, we should arrange a trip like this. That lodge costs $500 a night." So folks our age were able to buy lovely things. These talks happened every day. My job became my safe place. In early May, I started the underwater welding certification program. After my usual shifts, I went to class 3 nights a week. It was a tough curriculum. Technical diving, underwater cutting methods, and safety rules that could save your life 60 feet below the surface. I enjoyed every second of it. Kayla had been in favor of the certification at first, mostly because she had looked into how much money it could make. But she got angry as the program took up more of my time and efforts. I was either studying all the time, too exhausted to go out, or not putting our relationship first. She was spending 4 nights a week with her fitness pals and working extra hours to pay for her new way of life. But somehow, my 3 nights of classes were an issue. Leo said something that was evident during one of our study sessions at his shop. Please help me comprehend this. She doesn't like that you're studying to get more money, which is what she wants. But she's not upset that she has to pay for sessions that teach her how to breathe better while stretching. That makes a lot of sense. Things became really bad in late June when we tried to have a basic talk about our common calendar. That following weekend, she wanted to go to a wine tasting with her pals. We had planned to visit my parents. She said we should change the date of the family visit when I told her about the conflict. Kayla, it's not like we don't see your folks all the time. We haven't seen them since Easter, yet we planned these plans 2 months ago. I know, but this wine thing is vital. What for? For my job. These ladies are friends with persons who work in beauty. Jessica's husband knows people who work for some of the biggest makeup brands. I looked at her. You work with hair, not makeup. I might be able to. I might be thinking about more than just cutting hair for the rest of my life. She wasn't only unhappy with our relationship. She didn't like herself, the choices she made, or the life she had before she met her new pals. The wine tasting was a sign of everything that was wrong between us. I told Kayla that it would mess up our family plans, but she went nonetheless. She got home 3 hours late, a little drunk, and full of stories about the great people she had met. You should have gone with me. You would have learnt a lot about what successful individuals really do on the weekends. I was going to see my folks as planned, right? But sometimes you have to choose between being comfortable and wanting more. When I informed Leo about this exchange, his reaction was priceless. So it's ambitious to drink expensive wine with strangers, but it's comfortable to visit the folks who reared you. I'd love to watch these women try to fix a flat tire or keep their checkbook in order. Very ambitious things. Came time to make a choice in July. Sasayon. She had begun to say things about putting off the wedding. Not canceling it, but moving it back a year or 2 so we could figure out what we wanted to do. She wanted time to make sure we were laying the appropriate groundwork for our future. I told her we had to decide whether to go through with the wedding as planned or cancel it completely. Why does it have to be all or nothing? Why can't we just take a break and grow as people? Kayla, there's no middle ground. We're either developing something together or we're not. That's a really black and white way of thinking. Yes, it is. Because commitment is clear-cut. Kayla couldn't deal with that amount of honesty. She was used to talking to people where everything was up for grabs and every choice could be changed or put off until more information came in. We didn't argue about it. We didn't fight or yell at each other. We just progressively stopped being a relationship. Kayla would make plans without asking me first. I'd work hard and study for my certification. We'd go days without talking to one another and weeks without talking about anything more important than whose turn it was to get groceries. We were very much roommates who were engaged at the beginning of August. We'd meet up for an hour in the evening, talk about our days, and then go to bed at different times. It all came to an end on a Tuesday night in the middle of August. She had supper with friends and got home at 10 p.m. I was getting ready for my last certification test by spreading out my textbooks and practice tests on the kitchen table. For approximately 10 minutes, she sat across from me and watched me work without saying anything. Do you ever wonder what our lives will be like in 5 years? I stopped reading. I think about it all the time. What do you see? A garage with a workshop in it? Maybe some kids. A good job that pays well and keeps me interested. Spend time with family and friends who are important to you. Making something that lasts. She nodded slowly. That sounds wonderful, but I don't think that's enough for me anymore. What would be enough? I don't know yet. That's the issue, Kayla. You can't plan a wedding based on possible better choices. I'm not talking about anyone else. I mean potential. What did I not realize I could do? She finally said, I think we should talk about taking a break. Kayla, you can't take a break from being engaged. We're either going to get married or we aren't. Why do you have to be so sure about everything? That's how commitment works, though. We talked for another hour about the same things we had been talking about for weeks. Kayla wanted to be able to change her mind, have choices, and have time to figure out what she could do. I wanted a spouse who was sure about picking me, sure about making a life together, and sure about the future. We had to break up since we couldn't give each other what we desired. On a Friday night in August, 3 days later, the couple broke up for real. We had both had time to think about what we talked about on Tuesday, and neither of us had changed our minds. Kayla still needed time to sort things out. I still think that being engaged means we already knew the crucial things. For the last 3 days, Kayla had been chatting to her fitness pals about the troubles in our relationship. When she got home on Friday night, she looked like someone who had gotten a lot of good advice about making a hard but essential choice. "I've been thinking about what we talked about," she continued, as if she were about to give a speech, "and I think we desire different things at the moment. What do I want that you don't want? You want things to stay the way they are. You want to get married and live the same life we've always lived, but with rings and a marriage certificate. I want to get bigger. I want to push myself." That was the most honest thing she'd spoken in a long time. "Okay then," I said. "Let's call it off." I suppose Kayla thought there would be more fighting, more attempts to get her to stay, and more talks about terms and dates. She seemed almost upset when I quickly agreed with her choice. "Just like that. You just informed me, Kayla, that you don't think you can grow as a person while we're married. What am I expected to debate with?" "I didn't say it that way." "Yes, you did. You mentioned that if we get married, you won't be able to do what you know you can do. That suggests you think I'm stopping you from doing things. I believe that the relationship is keeping us both from moving forward." "From what?" She still couldn't give me a clear answer. She only made vague references to potential, growth, and options she hadn't looked into yet. There was no drama when the ring came off. Kayla took it off her finger and put it on the coffee table between us, like she was giving back a library book. I took it and put it in my pocket. "What about the deposits for the wedding?" she asked. "I'll take care of the cancellations. You can take care of your outfit. What about our friends? They are grown-ups. They will figure it out." We spent the next hour figuring out the details. Kayla would stay at her flat. I'd take my things out over the weekend. We would divide up the things we owned together. Not much, since we had never lived together for real. We would notify our families separately instead of making a big deal out of it. The whole talk was quite polite. That weekend, when Kayla was away with her friends, I packed up my things. It didn't take long because I had always taken care of my own flat. My clothes, some books, a few kitchen things I brought over, and my tools that I stored in her garage. I was able to fit everything in my pickup in 2 trips. Put her keys on the kitchen counter with a message thanking her for the 6 years they were together and wishing her well. We had already said everything that needed to be said. Therefore, I didn't see the sense in a theatrical goodbye scenario. Calling her parents was the hardest part. For 8 months, these people had been planning to become my in-laws. I told them the essentials. They were let down. Emma, her little sister, had a difficult time. She was looking forward to being a bridesmaid and had already chosen her dress. I told her that grown-ups sometimes realize they aren't as compatible as they believed, and that it was better to find that out before getting married than after. I was shocked that my parents were relieved. They said they had been worried about Kayla's mood swings during the past few months. I guess I wasn't disguising my anger as well as I thought I was. A lot of our pals weren't startled either. A few others said they had noticed that Kayla had been acting differently lately, becoming more critical and less engaged in group activities. The only real shock was how quickly Kayla got over it. She was uploading images of her visits to fancy restaurants and weekends with her fitness friends within 2 weeks. Her presence on social media altered completely. More pictures of her alone and with her new friends, and fewer pictures of her with her family and couples. I didn't use social media at all for the first month. Didn't need to read about Kayla's new life or why our relationship ended. Leo was the first person to see how I was doing following the breakup. He came to my flat with a case of drinks and his usual subtle way of being there for me. "So, Kayla's finally free to explore her full potential," he said, cracking open a bottle. I give it 3 months before she's texting you about how yoga class didn't prepare her for the real world. September through November was about rebuilding my life as a single person and focusing on the goals I'd set before Kayla decided our relationship was holding her back. I finished my underwater welding certification in early October, passing all the technical and practical exams on the first try. The program had been challenging, but I genuinely enjoyed the technical aspects and the problem-solving required for underwater repairs. Within a week of getting certified, I had 3 job offers. The specialized work, and there aren't many people qualified to do it safely. I chose a company that handles infrastructure repairs for bridges, dams, and offshore platforms across the Southeast. The money was exactly what I'd hoped for. My first contract was a bridge inspection and repair project that paid $2,800 for a weekend's work. Not bad for someone who supposedly wasn't ambitious enough. I moved to a better apartment in November. 2 bedrooms, garage space for my truck and equipment, workshop area for side projects. Nothing fancy, but comfortable and functional. Started saving for a down payment on a house, figuring I'd be ready to buy something within 2 years. Work kept me busy and satisfied. The regular fabrication job provided steady income and interesting projects. The underwater contracts were both challenging and lucrative. I was learning constantly, solving problems I'd never encountered before, building skills that few people possessed. I also started hitting the gym consistently for the first time since high school. Not because I was trying to prove anything, but because the underwater work required serious physical conditioning. Dating wasn't a priority, but I wasn't actively avoiding it either. Went out with a few women I met through friends or work connections. Nothing serious, just casual dinners and movies. It felt good to spend time with people who were interested in me rather than trying to convince me to become someone else. Through mutual friends, I heard occasional updates about Kayla. She was still working at the salon but taking additional classes in some kind of advanced beauty technique. Still hanging out with her fitness friends, though apparently the group dynamics were getting complicated. Something about money and competing for attention from the same social circles. In November, I ran into Jessica at a coffee shop downtown. One of Kayla's fitness friends, the lawyer's wife who drove the BMW and went to Cabo. She recognized me and came over to say hello. "How are you doing?" Kayla mentioned you guys had decided to take different paths. "I'm doing well. Work's going great, staying busy." "That's good to hear." Kayla said you were getting into some kind of specialized welding, underwater welding. "Just finished certification." Jessica looked genuinely interested. "That sounds fascinating and probably very well paying." "It's good work, I bet." "My husband has clients in the maritime industry. They're always complaining about how hard it is to find qualified underwater welders." We talked for a few more minutes about work and mutual acquaintances. Jessica was polite and seemed genuinely friendly, which made me wonder how much influence she'd actually had on Kayla's decision-making. Maybe Kayla had been hearing what she wanted to hear rather than getting the direct advice she claimed. At the end of our conversation, Jessica said something interesting. "For what it's worth, I always thought you and Kayla were good together. Sometimes people get restless and think the grass is greener somewhere else." December brought my first major underwater contract, a dam repair project that would take 3 weeks and pay more than I used to make in 6 months at the regular fabrication job. I loved every minute of it. The project team was small, just 5 guys, all specialists in different aspects of underwater construction. We worked efficiently, trusted each other's expertise, and took pride in solving problems that most people couldn't even understand. Between regular work and underwater contracts, I was making more money than I'd ever imagined. I started thinking about buying a house earlier than planned. With my income trajectory and the money I'd saved, I could afford something substantial. Leo helped me look at houses during weekends in December. His commentary on my improved financial situation was typically understated. "So, you're making 6 figures doing something most people can't even pronounce, and Kayla thinks you needed more ambition." I'm starting to think those fitness classes affected more than just her flexibility. January brought the headaches. At first, just occasional sharp pain behind my left eye, usually when I was working in awkward positions or dealing with complex underwater repairs. I figured it was occupational neck strain from wearing heavy diving equipment, I strained from working in low visibility conditions, maybe some sinus issues from pressure changes. The headaches got more frequent through February and more intense. Not constant pain, but sudden sharp episodes that would leave me dizzy and disoriented for several minutes. I started keeping ibuprofen in my truck and taking breaks more often during long work sessions. The vision problem started in early March. At first, it only lasted a few seconds, but the episodes became longer and more frequent. When I started having trouble focusing during precision welding work, I knew something was seriously wrong. You can't afford concentration lapses when you're working with cutting torches in confined spaces. Made an appointment with my regular doctor in late March. He asked about my symptoms, did some basic tests, and immediately referred me to a neurologist. That was my first indication this wasn't just jobriated stress or eye strain. The neurologist ordered a series of tests, MRI scans, blood work, cognitive assessments, professional, but clearly concerned about what the initial scans were showing. Started asking questions about family medical history and whether I'd experienced any head injuries. While waiting for test results, I tried to maintain normal routines, kept working regular fabrication jobs, but turned down underwater contracts until I knew what was going on. Leo was the one who drove me to get the test results. The seizure happened on a Saturday morning in early April. I was at Home Depot picking up materials for a side project when everything went sideways. 1 second I was comparing prices on copper fittings. The next second I was on the ground with paramedics asking me basic questions I couldn't answer. I don't remember the seizure itself, just the confusion afterward. The paramedics said witnesses described about 90 seconds of convulsions before I gradually regained consciousness. Emergency room. More tests, more doctors with increasingly serious expressions. Finally, a neurosurgeon sat me down with scan results that showed exactly why I'd been having problems. Brain tumor, gloma about the size of a walnut located in an area that controlled vision and motor coordination. Explained the headaches, the vision problems, and the seizure. Surgery was possible, but it would be complex and carry significant risks. Sometimes life throws unexpected challenges and you either handle them professionally or you don't. I chose to handle it professionally. The surgeon was optimistic about complete removal but honest about potential complications. Brain surgery isn't like fixing a welding error. You can't just grind out the bad section and start over. We scheduled the operation for the following Tuesday and started preparing for a long recovery period. My boss at the fabrication shop was incredibly supportive, held my position, coordinated with insurance, made sure I understood the job would be there when I was ready. The underwater welding company was equally accommodating. They knew skilled people were rare and weren't going anywhere. Word got around quickly in our small town. Most of my friends started organizing visits and support. My parents drove down from 2 states away. What I didn't expect was hearing from Kayla. Leo was with me when the nurse mentioned that someone named Kayla had called asking about visiting hours. Oh hell no, Leo said immediately. She disappears for 8 months and now wants to show up because you're in the hospital. What's next? She gonna bring flowers and an apology letter? Kayla showed up at the hospital on Saturday, 3 days before my scheduled surgery. I was reviewing preoperative instructions when she walked into my room, looking like she'd been crying, but with something desperate in her eyes that had nothing to do with concern for my health. I heard what happened. How are you feeling? I'm fine. Surgery's Tuesday, then recovery. She sat down without being invited and started with what seemed like genuine small talk. Asked about the doctors, the procedure, my parents' visit. After about 10 minutes of carefully neutral conversation, she shifted to what felt like the real reason for her visit. Listen, I know the timing isn't great, but I really need to talk to someone I trust about some problems I'm having. There it was. Not, I'm sorry about your diagnosis. Just I need something from you. You should leave. I told her directly. Please just hear me out. I made some serious mistakes and I don't know what to do. Kayla, I'm having brain surgery in 3 days. I don't want to hear about your problems. Her concerned act dropped immediately, replaced by the entitled attitude I remembered from our breakup. Fine, but I'm in real trouble here. That guy I was dating turned out to be married, and his wife is trying to destroy my life. And my friends convinced me to invest in some real estate deals that turned out to be completely fake. And now I owe almost $300,000. I just stared at her. And you thought I'd care about this because we were together for 6 years. Because you know me better than anyone, because I lost my job and I can't make rent and everyone I thought I could trust disappeared. Sounds like you got exactly what you were looking for. What's that supposed to mean? You wanted to explore your potential, date more ambitious people, see what you were capable of achieving. How's that working out? Kayla's voice started rising, getting more desperate and aggressive. I know I made mistakes, okay? I know I said things I shouldn't have said, but I thought you'd be mature enough to help someone who needs it. Help with what? Cleaning up the mess you made by deciding I wasn't good enough for you. I pressed the call button for the nurse. Kayla saw what I was doing and completely lost control. You can't be serious right now. I'm telling you I need help and you're calling security. Ma'am, you need to lower your voice, the nurse said as she entered the room. This is ridiculous. We were engaged. We were going to get married. You can't just throw away 6 years because I made one mistake. Ma'am, I'm going to have to ask you to leave the room, the nurse said firmly. 2 security guards appeared in the doorway as Kayla became increasingly hysterical. I still love you. I still care about you. Everything I said was stupid and I was wrong and I'm sorry. Ma'am, we need you to come with us. One of the guards said, You're making a huge mistake. I am the best thing that has ever happened to you. You'll regret this. As security escorted her out, she kept yelling down the hallway about how I was being unreasonable and how she was just trying to make things right. The nurse shook her head and asked if I was okay. Never been better, I told her honestly. Leo showed up about an hour after the Kayla incident, carrying coffee and wearing the expression of someone who'd heard the whole story from the nurses. I filled him in on Kayla's surprise visit and her request for help with her problems. So Leo said when I finished, she dates a married guy, gets scammed by her friends, loses her job, and then decides to come beg for help from the man she dumped for not being ambitious enough. That's like setting your house on fire and then asking the fire department for a loan. The surgery went perfectly. 8.5 hours, but the surgeon achieved complete tumor removal with clean margins and no complications. Recovery was textbook. 10 days in the hospital, then 6 weeks at my parents' house while I regained full strength and coordination. Leo visited me almost daily during recovery, bringing updates from work and increasingly ridiculous stories about what he'd been telling people about my condition. I told your neighbor, Mrs. Peterson, that they had to replace part of your brain with a welding torch, he said during one visit. She believed it for about 30 seconds until I mentioned the flame would interfere with your sleep. During recovery, I heard updates about Kayla's situation through Emma, who would visit occasionally to check on my progress. The full scope of Kayla's poor decision-making was actually worse than what she'd admitted in the hospital. The married man she'd been dating wasn't just cheating on his wife. He'd been using Kayla and several other women to help launder money through fraudulent real estate investments. His wife wasn't just angry about the affair. She was cooperating with federal investigators, building a case against her husband's business activities. Kayla wasn't just a victim of the real estate scam. She was potentially facing criminal charges as an unwitting accomplice. The $300,000 debt was real, but she also owed back taxes on unreported income from the fake investments. The IRS had frozen her bank accounts while they investigated her involvement. The salon had fired her not just because of the affair drama, but because they discovered she'd been overcharging clients for services and pocketing the difference. Her fancy friends hadn't just disappeared when her money problem started. They'd actively distanced themselves to avoid being associated with the criminal investigation. But here's the most satisfying part. Kayla's parents refused to bail her out. After learning about how she treated me and hearing about her entitled hospital meltdown from Emma, they decided their daughter needed to face the consequences. She ended up having to declare bankruptcy, lost her apartment, and moved back in with a distant aunt in another state. The criminal investigation followed her there, and she was eventually charged with conspiracy to commit fraud, though she ultimately pled down to a misdemeanor with restitution requirements. By August, I was back to full-time work, including underwater contracts. The doctors had cleared me completely. No cognitive impairment, no motor coordination issues, no restrictions on my activities. I found the engagement ring in my safe while organizing my equipment, decided to sell it, and put the money toward a down payment on a house. No point keeping reminders of people who don't exist anymore.